This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. What happened did not begin today, and it will not end today. What you're watching is something quieter and far more dangerous. A system designed for order is being forced to improvise, not because it failed outright, but because it was never built for this moment. Rules are being followed, procedures are being invoked, authority is being asserted, and yet something fundamental is slipping. You can feel it in how carefully everyone is choosing their words, in how every action now carries consequences far beyond the room where it happens. This is not chaos. This is strain. And when systems strain long enough, they don't snap all at once. They recalibrate slowly, permanently. If you want to understand how power changes without announcing itself, stay with me. Because what this reveals is not obvious yet. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. And the next step is already underway. What actually controls this system right now is not a person, not an office, not even the law itself. It is the absence of precedent. Institutions run on expectation, on patterns, on knowing what comes next. And here, there is no next step everyone agrees on. Every actor is technically correct. Every rule being cited exists. Every power being exercised is real. But the system is no longer refereeing outcomes. It is negotiating them. Courts are enforcing order while sensing the weight of history. Political actors are responding while calculating reactions. The public is watching while trying to decide what normal even means anymore. This is how control shifts. Not through a coup, not through collapse, through hesitation. When a system starts asking itself how far it can go, instead of what it must do, authority doesn't disappear, it fragments. And once fragmentation begins, every decision becomes heavier than the last. Which brings us to the change that made this moment possible at all. Because this didn't arrive suddenly. It arrived quietly, over years. There was a time when this kind of moment would have stopped everything. Not because it was forbidden, but because it was unthinkable before the system relied on restraint more than enforcement. Norms did the work that rules did not have to. Power avoided the courtroom, and the courtroom avoided power. That balance wasn't written down. It didn't need to be, but slowly that changed. What used to be exceptional became arguable. What used to be arguable became routine. And what used to be routine stopped feeling strange at all. Each step felt small, procedural, defensible, until the system crossed a line without realizing it had moved. Now, behavior once handled through politics is being handled through procedure. And procedure is being stretched to cover situations it was never designed for. This is the most dangerous kind of shift. Not loud, not sudden, normalized. Because when a system adapts quietly, people stop asking whether it should. They only ask whether it can. And that question is about to collide with reality. Today, the system flinched. Not because something went wrong, but because something worked exactly as written. A rule meant to maintain order was enforced. A warning was issued, then followed through. And for the first time in this context, the system did something it technically has always been allowed to do. It removed the problem from the room, not symbolically, physically. The proceeding continued. The process moved on. The machinery did not stop. That's the shock. Not the act itself, but how smoothly everything kept going afterward. No emergency brake, no constitutional pose, no agreed upon protocol for what this means. Just silence where a presence used to be. This wasn't a climax. It was a demonstration, a reminder that the system can function without consent from the very power it was built around. That realization landed everywhere at once. In courtrooms, in campaigns, in living rooms. And it raised a question no one is ready to answer. If this can happen once, what happens the second time? And who decides where the line is then? Here is how the system actually works. Order is preserved by isolating disruption, not by resolving it. When friction appears, the institution absorbs the shock By narrowing the frame, behavior becomes procedure. Conflict becomes compliance. The system does not ask why the moment is happening. It asks how to proceed anyway, and that decision has a cost. Those with institutional insulation benefit, rules protect them, process buys them time. Those without it absorb uncertainty, delays, ambiguity, erosion of trust. The court keeps moving, politics keeps reacting, and the public is left to interpret fragments after the fact. This is not bias. It's design. A system built to survive pressure will always prioritize continuity over clarity. But continuity without clarity creates something unstable, because people start filling in the gaps themselves, and once interpretation replaces consensus, authority stops being shared. It becomes contested, which is why the next shock won't feel procedural at all. It will feel personal, and it's already forming. Now the system speeds up. Motions stack. Deadlines compress. Decisions carry weight they were never meant to hold. Every move triggers a reaction. Every reaction becomes evidence. Every pause is interpreted as intent. Authority tightens. Language narrows. Tolerance drops. There is less room to maneuver, less space for restraint, less patience for ambiguity. What once felt extraordinary now feels procedural. And that is the acceleration, because the more often a system uses its hardest tools, the easier they are to reach for next time. Lines harden, expectations reset, and suddenly what happened earlier no longer feels like a boundary. It feels like a reference point, something to cite, something to repeat, something to escalate from. This is the danger zone, not collapse, not chaos. Momentum. When systems move on momentum, they don't ask where they're going. They only ask what comes next. And the next impact won't stay contained. Here's where this reaches you. Not as a headline, not as history, as precedent. Because when systems normalize extraordinary force, they don't stop at the original target. They refine it. What you're watching is the rehearsal phase, the testing of boundaries, the quiet rewriting of expectations. You feel it as delay, as noise, as exhaustion. Trust becomes conditional. Legitimacy becomes debated. Outcomes start to feel provisional, and that changes behavior. People hedge. Institutions harden. Caution replaces confidence. You don't have to choose a side to feel the weight of that. You only have to live inside it. This is the moment where attention matters, not outrage. Attention. Because once a system teaches itself that it can proceed under strain, it will again and again. If you want to understand how this reshapes power long before the next decision is announced, stay with me. Because this is no longer contained to one place. This doesn't stay domestic. Systems watch each other closely. Every extraordinary action becomes a data point. Every workaround becomes a template. Allies study the language. Adversaries study the gaps. They don't ask whether the moment was justified. They ask whether it was possible. And what it reveals is leverage. When legal authority collides with political power and continues anyway, that signal travels. It alters expectations about immunity, about stability, about how much strain a democracy can absorb before it recalibrates. Markets react to uncertainty. Governments adjust posture. Institutions quietly update risk models, not because they know what will happen, but because they no longer assume what won't. This is how global systems respond to ambiguity. They hedge, they prepare, they harden. What looked like a contained procedural decision is now a variable in much larger equations. And once uncertainty becomes systemic, it doesn't resolve on a schedule. It compounds, which brings us to the future pressure points. Because from here, the system only has a few directions left, and none of them are neutral. From here, the system has three possible trajectories. The first is adjustment. Rules are clarified, Boundaries are formalized. Extraordinary actions become codified exceptions. The system survives by narrowing uncertainty. But at the cost of flexibility, everything works just colder, more rigid. The second is erosion. Nothing breaks outright. Instead, trust thins. Each new decision feels slightly less legitimate than the last. Compliance becomes conditional. Authority still exists, but it's constantly challenged. The system keeps functioning, but fewer people believe in it. Then there is rupture.